In the spirit of reconciliation, Red Piranha acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. Welcome to the Red Piranha Tech Sprint series presentations. In this video, we will talk about effective detection through policy. My name is Ben Ayler. I'm the product manager of Red Piranha, and I'm joined by Red Piranha's operations manager, Anthony Blackman, who I'll hand over to now. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks, guys. Good to see you all. And thanks very much, Ben. As mentioned, my name is Anthony Blackman. I'm the operations manager here at Red Piranha, and I would like to take you through some effective detection through policy. So we're calling these knowledge sprints a little bit. The agenda today is to set the stage a little bit for a demonstration of a honeypot or a honey file, as it were, and then to have a bit of a discussion around why policy is beneficial to set. And we're not talking about strategic policies here, we're talking about technical policies. So data loss prevention is a policy-based control set that combines processes and tools to mitigate the risk of accidental or deliberate misuse of sensitive information. And of course, a honeypot is an example of a deception technique, often implemented as a decoy file or a system that's designed to attract a threat actor and increase the opportunity to detect and respond to their malicious actions. So I just want to clarify here that catching the patient attacker is one of the main goals of policy. Good policies do contribute meaningfully as a mechanism to help interrupt less sophisticated attack styles. However, where they really shine is in catching the slower, carefully obfuscated attackers that are digging through the network under the guise of normal activity with already compromised credentials. We're looking here for assurance that an event is identifiably related to some misuse of assets or resources, taking what might be a 50-50 call to something much closer to a one-to-one event to incident relationship. So what do we really want here? We want real-time, high-quality alerts to malicious activity in progress. And to be fair, real-time is a difficult one to answer. I mean, you look at cloud environments, for example, for the logs to aggregate, sometimes it can take 60 to 90 minutes and things like that for them to be ingested into your monitoring agents. But how we get that is by establishing policies, in this case through Microsoft Purview in combination with the Crystal Eye. And that's actually the second layer of assurance there through the Crystal Eye. It gives you that second point of reference, that additional indicator of compromise that provides an analyst with additional information. So I'll pass over to Ben, our product manager, for a demonstration of this.
All right, thanks very much, Anthony. Okay. All right, so in this demonstration, we're going to make a few assumptions. We're going to assume that the initial access to an authorized or trusted workstation has already been gained through some other means. The attacker has access to the Azure tenancy via this trusted workstation. Now, there is a sensitive file we've got on this, and the idea is, I mean, this is essentially our honeypot. This is that attractive piece of information, or that attractive file that we're going to try and get our attacker to download or exfiltrate. So this attacker we're going to assume is smarter than the average attacker, and what they're going to do is they're not going to try and exfiltrate directly from the Azure tenancy, because they'll assume that there's some sort of controls or alerts in place, which I will show. What we're going to assume is they're going to download it to the secured workstation, or the trusted workstation, and then exfiltrate through that using living off the land techniques. So using the tools that usually come with most workstations that you find in an office environment. Okay, so bear with me for just a second and I'll set up some sharing here of the screens. And any second now. All right, and here we go. All right, so what we're looking at here is the Purview dashboard. But what we'll look at first is setting up the actual honey file. So of course, we'll need to establish the file before we can start setting up the alerts and the traps around it. So we'll go to, let's say we've set up a site called operations. Hopefully this is nice and attractive to an attacker, and something that is possibly going to hold valuable information called registering data. Now, if we go into this, there's some fake information, of course, but something that kind of looks interesting. So the attacker is going to look at it. They're going to say, okay, this looks like something of value to us. And you'll notice that we got things like names, driver's license numbers, and possibly tax file numbers, some other sort of information. Again, something that's fake, but also something that looks attractive. Now, what we've also thrown in here is this weird string of numbers. Now, I'll show you why a little later on. But for now, we can just say that this string of numbers is what you'd expect to see in a Philippines passport. Okay, so now that we've set up the file, what we also do is we take a copy of this file. So this is going to be a two-pronged thing. We'll first set up alerts for exfiltration from our Azure tenancy out to the general world. So we're just chasing for that sort of basic attacker who's going to see the information and try and get it out. So we do this by going to our data loss prevention features or solutions in Microsoft Purview, and we go to our policies. Now, under policies, we've created a new one here. And we've done this because it does take a little time to get this set up. We can go in and we can actually edit this policy, and I'll show you what's been done here. So this policy is called Philippine Passport. Why? Because we're using that string of characters that make it sort of look like a Philippines passport, and it's going to trigger DLP alerts in the Microsoft Purview application. It's going to be full directory admin rights, locations. So this is where the monitoring is happening. So if this DLP alert is being, if this DLP, this sensitive information is being exfiltrated through these channels, it will throw the alert. Now, the advanced part, the Philippine passport. So we set up a customized DLP advanced rule. We'll edit this and have a closer look. So it's a default group name. The interesting thing here is we've defined a sensitive info types. Now, these are presets, which is quite handy. So it just makes everything a lot easier to set up and a lot faster. I've set the confidence to be low because I'm pretty confident that with this tenancy, what we're trying to protect here, the use of a Philippines passport is actually quite rare. So if we seek any movement of a Philippines passport, it's most likely going to be a honey file. That's the important thing there. We can also define additional rules, our exceptions, our actions, user notifications with policy tips, user overrides, and incident reports. Now, I've actually changed this one as well. So whenever we see a Philippines passport string, matching string, is they try to exfil it from our Azure tenancy, it will actually throw a high alert, a high severity alert, because when we see this sort of movement, we know that it's someone pushing the file that is designed to trick people. So we'll want to look into that. So that's that rule there. So we've gone and defined that custom rule. We go on to next. And you might want to test it out first, but we know this one works, so we'll turn it on right away. And we submit. Now, with that submitted, it should start generating alerts pretty much right away. And there's a 60 to 90 minute window, because it takes time to get these alerts through. Here's some we prepared earlier. As you can see, we've seen a DLP policy match. So the first one went through was low severity. I thought we could probably do better than that, call that high severity. Now, the really cool thing is that we will actually capture these alerts and feed them into the Crystal Eye appliance itself. We can do that by going to our Crystal Eye, go to Compliance Controls, Azure Active Directory, and Security Compliance Dashboard. And there we go. We can see these alerts that have popped up right away. So that takes care of the file being moved out of the Azure tenancy. What if the attacker downloads the file onto this secure workstation and then tries to exfiltrate it to another location outside of the network? Well, what we do there is we use our data loss protection or DLP application built into the Crystal Eye. So what we've done here, we've actually defined our file. So we've downloaded the file, uploaded it to the Crystal Eye. It's generated a hash, and we've actually tagged that file. So anytime the Crystal Eye sees this file traverse the gateway, so go from the LAN to the WAN, it will throw an alert. Now, what we can do here, it's actually tagged the whole file, just for anyone who's interested. Now that we've seen it tagged, it's been downloaded, someone's tried to exfiltrate it, we've got that alert there, registrant data.xls. And actually, just for fun, I'm going to demonstrate it right now. So let's say bad guys got onto this authorized workstation. They've opened up a prompt to a Linux machine or whatever, and we're going to now use curl to send this file out to, well, somewhere they're going to stash it and sell it or use it to extort money out of the victim. So they send it off. It's been sent correctly. It's gone as expected, and right away, so we'll just do a quick refresh of that interface there. We should right away, there it is there, it's just been sent. So we've got all the details there. We know where it's come from, where it's going to. We can even, so you just look at the last hour. So there we go. So there's that alert that's just gone through now. We can also export this as a PDF directly from the Crystal Eye appliance. So you can grab that report and take it off to a decision maker to say, look, we've got to take some action. And there we go. We just create that report there. Simple as that. Okay. Now, it is a pretty straightforward and simple demo, because it is actually quite simple, and it's something I believe that all organisations should look at doing before they start worrying about whether employees are on social media or not. This is actually a more valuable signal, in my opinion. Okay, we'll go back to our presentation. All right, that's a live demo. Okay, right, well, now's a point where we like to have a little bit of a discussion about what we've just seen, and hopefully bring up some answers bring up some questions and answers that you might be asking at the moment. Now, if anyone does have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat and we'll answer them as best we can. But look, we'll start off with, look, my first question anyway is, look, Anthony, why should we bother to set up a honeypot? Whoop, you're on mute. There we go. It's a song of our people. Almost.
The song of our people, indeed. My apologies, everyone. So it's a very good question. A honeypot is a decoy. It's functionally an additional layer of obfuscation within your information asset structure that might help identify malicious activity. And what it's doing is it's directing the attacker away from your critical assets. But it's important to note here that digital transformation projects, they often leave unsecured legacy assets, and threat actors know this. So when you've gone through the process of a digital transformation, you've uplifted your tech stack, any number of reasons this might have occurred, a pivot in strategy or a change in scale, any of those things. So you've established that what needs to be protected, and you've protected it, but there are a whole bunch of leftover files from when you were a startup. They're still unsecured legacy assets, and attackers know this. So we're leveraging the psychology of the patient attacker here and increasing the difficulty of them operating undetected. Now, to be clear, configuring a honeypot through these or any other techniques, of which there are many, it does not reduce the need to set in place other strong controls and strategies like access control, conditional access, all of those kinds of things.
Yep, okay. And about the policies, I mean, how does setting up these policies improve our security?
Well, configuring policies increases the efficacy of monitoring services, and that really is the goal. It's to improve the chance of early detection, and what it does is it helps you align the enforcement process with the strategic directives. So those strategic directives are often delivered in ISMS policies, the different type of policy, obviously, but those are the documented policies that an organization adheres to. driven by the executive direction. So they also provide the technical control against the identified risks, and often those risks listed in the policies themselves. This goes actually even further with high assurance policies reinforced by stacked sensors, providing a strong set of indicators that an analyst can use to verify and escalate more quickly. The more indicators of compromise that can be identified, the more information that can be gathered on the nature of the attack and at an earlier stage.
Okay, so do we actually have any examples of how a policy might have interrupted an actual attack?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen cases where we're brought in for post-incident investigation, where configured policies and SIEM ingestion definitely would have provided actionable high assurance alarms before threat actors were able to escalate or elevate their privileges. But we've also seen cases where organizations that have elevated their posture and have configured solid policies actually respond considerably better at an earlier stage and suffer far lower consequences. Sometimes those have worked even in the case where alert ingestion is not fully formalized. So the policy structures are set up properly and they've mitigated the actual effects of the breach actively.
All right, so that takes care of the actual attacks, but what about when it comes to addressing risks? Can policy help mitigate that?
Absolutely. The risk to control examples are myriad. Conditional access policies to help limit the effects of BECs, especially for mobile device remote access. This is a very common problem in the modern world in terms of hybrid deployments of things. So when you get to that stage where you're using your mobile phone to access your emails and things like that, you have to consider how you access it, where you should be accessing it from. There's plenty of examples of business email compromise where someone has logged in from a suspicious location, but it hasn't been formally set up as policy, and therefore that login is allowed and it leads to a further breach. Communication policies can also reduce the risk of inappropriate information sharing within organization systems. And to clarify further, policy really shines at identifying the patient persistent threats that dig through systems that gather information slowly and very carefully. Policy breaches can trigger an incident response long before a threat actor is actually ready.
Yeah, this all sounds like a lot of work to some people, and I'm pretty sure there'd be some out there who would just say, why not just restrict access to all sensitive information?
Well, access control represents only one part, one defensive layer in an information security management system. It is extremely important, but it doesn't account for the risk that the credentials themselves are compromised, which can then be used to traverse the network and to gain access to resources. Well-established policies can help identify an attacker even when they are hiding behind legitimate appearing user access, potentially triggering alarms when the threat actor attempts to extend influence through privilege escalation, by attempting to locate or view sensitive data beyond the account's purview, or by simply breaching a misunderstood acceptable use policy.
Excellent, thanks, Anthony. Look, we've actually got some questions from the chat. So look, thanks, Liam, for your question. Hey, his question is, where would you recommend placing Honeypot files? I'm thinking HR folders, backup storage locations. Are there any others that attackers usually target and would or should be considered? I mean, I can contribute a little bit to this, I guess.
Absolutely.
One of the most common scenarios I've seen, especially when we have to deal with an inside threat, is like when we have somebody from sales. They might move on, and what they like to do is they like to take the address book with them. So you could do things like actually mark that address book as a honey file. Yes, it's a legitimate file, but it also gives you that heads up that somebody has actually taken that really sensitive and that valuable information, which is of great value to the business itself. HR backup storage folders, yeah, they're classic locations. Just anywhere that you think someone would go and just look for important information, stuff like intellectual property. So if you have a patents folder, they might be chasing that. It really depends on what the attacker is looking for. Do you have anything to add, Anthony?
Well, I would also carefully consider what you actually want out of your honey file or your honeypot here. There are many strategies. So as I mentioned earlier, digital transformation is a pretty common kind of process that leaves behind legacy files, it can be really valuable, for example, to put up a SharePoint site that is no longer connected to by the bulk of the organization that might be a bit hidden. You know, you've got to make it a little bit more difficult. You might even set in place some minimal access control on that to make it look like it's a little bit difficult, to make it look interesting.
Yep, excellent. Pierre's asked a question. Any advice on how to make the data in the Honeypot file looking more real?
Look, absolutely. What we did here was a telegraph. You know, we used a Philippine string, a Philippine passport string directly into the file. But what you could do, for example, is list passport files and simply have, instead of your locality passports, use some other country passport strings. Obviously, you need to generate those as test data, not legitimate data, because you don't want any legitimate data in this file at all. But it has to look legitimate. And so by making it more, you know, real in the sense that it contains all of the information you would expect, you can absolutely generate them in large quantities. There are any number of online resources to take care of this. Banks even, for example, supply you with credit card information that can be used as an exemplar. And it's about assuring that the specific Honey file that you are looking at will trigger a specific rule. And that, you know, the mechanisms by which you can do that are many. We chose one that was relatively simple to telegraph and to explain the process, but it would definitely be worth salting in sort of the standard into a larger data set, for example, a much larger one than we showed, a string that is different perhaps than the others that wouldn't be immediately obvious. Yeah. When a threat actor, especially a patient one, is looking for data, they're not looking for 5 entries. They're looking for tens of thousands if they can get them. Yep. So absolutely generate those kinds of files.
Yeah, I think it's also important to note that when you are generating these sorts of files, that they are, I suppose, in line with the context of the title of that file. So it's no good saying phone numbers and just putting email addresses in there. That's obviously going to look fishy. Yeah. So yeah,
indeed,
that's the I suppose the advice we have when it comes to generating fake data.
Definitely. And also aligned to your organization. You know, if you're not the kind of organization that would keep a specific type of data like passports or anything like that, look for something else that is outside of your normal kind of data, but just close enough that it might look the same. And to be honest, the threat actor is not going to be taking the time to look at column Z in a large file to identify whether or not those particular passport numbers are actually local passport numbers. That's very unlikely.
Yeah, but yeah, absolutely try different ways of going about it. Your mileage may vary, but yeah, and everyone's situation is a bit different. But this is a part where we can get really creative.
Absolutely. And remember, the Honey file example is really primarily there to highlight the benefit of policy. It's an extremely high assurance alarm, and fundamentally it's a trap for a patient attacker. But all of the other types of policies are also traps because they are guided by the strategic direction of the company. And at the point where you are implementing them, those policies fundamentally represent an additional sensor that provides an additional indicator of compromise. And it may trigger off what a threat actor might think is a legitimate access of the system, even though it's actually not, according to the strategic direction.
Fantastic. Well, I think that rounds out the questions. I haven't seen any more come up in chat. So I suppose final thoughts, Anthony.
Final thoughts. Well, cybersecurity is a journey without a destination. I've put it there large on the screen. The truth is, you know, the policy process of configuring all of your policies and setting them in place and making sure that they're effective sensors for your particular situation, that's an ongoing process that not everybody has the in-house expertise to handle. We here at Red Piranha are actually here to help in that sense. What our purpose is here is to be on the journey with you, not to simply tell you that policies are good and you should implement them, but to be there to help you implement them and to assist you in the actual process itself. Liam does have a quick question regarding does Red Piranha assist with ISMS consulting? Absolutely. We assist with both implementation of strategic policy, but we'll also tie that back to the tools themselves. Remember, the technical policy is an enforcement strategy against a strategic direction.
Excellent.
So that's it from me, I think.
All righty. All right, that's the Q&A. That's everything. Look, thanks very much for joining us. It's actually been a lot of fun presenting. This is actually our first technical sprint, and I think it's a great format. I'm really looking forward to doing more with you, Anthony, and with others in the organisation. And I really hope that people who have viewed this presentation have actually got something out of it. If you want to know any more, please go to redpiranha.net. We've got our support documentation. That's at docs.redpiranha.net. We've also got a forum, so feel free to join us there, forum.redpiranha.net. And of course, if you do want to look into anything further, please drop us a line. We'll be more than happy to help. Thanks very much.
Definitely. Thank you all.